I am so excited to continue speaking with my dear friend Lorna McGee, who's a professional flute player and the first flute at the Pittsburgh Symphony, and also teaches at Carnegie Mellon at the university. And in this part of our conversation, I want to talk about collaboration, collaborating with Alexander teachers. I know that we've worked a lot together and continue to work together and will continue. I have sort of three questions. The first one is, if an Alexander teacher who's not a musician asks your advice about how to work with musicians, what would you say?
I would say musicians are so conditioned to being told something's right or wrong. And they try so hard to do the right thing all the time. And that's often what gets us into trouble. So I would say to be very careful with your language, that you don't get into the language of right and wrong. Because actually, the Alexander, it needs to be a sanctuary outside of that realm, outside of that kind of dualistic way of thinking. It needs to be more like a wonderful creative laboratory where you can try things that are out of the habit. And so I think also musicians are so conditioned to look for approval. You know, they're vulnerable all the time. Their profession is vulnerable. You know, will the audience like you? Will they hate it? You get reviewed. You get rejected at auditions. You get conductors telling you do this, do that. So I think taking out any kind of, like, you don't want to get into that dynamic with if you have a student who's a musician. I think it's very, very helpful if it's a different dynamic, because I think you can probably get into trouble if the student starts to try to get your approval. You know, that will slow them down in their own progress or their own development.
From my perspective, I would say stick to Alexander principles. This is what you know best.
Yeah, I think that's
And
really,
apply those principles in this case in the context of music making, but leave the musicianship to the musician and give observations and suggestions and the process of framing through the principles. What's the habit? What are you stopping? Where are you supporting yourself? Where's your breath? Where are you overworking? Where are you underworking?
and I think also the language of judgment can, you know, I think one has to even be very careful with that. Even the words better or worse. You know, it's maybe, oh, that sounds freer, or that sounds deeper, or, you know. So I think they care about, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, and what we,
Taking all of this in, I
Mhm.
wouldn't discourage an Alexander teacher who's non-musician to work with a musician.
Oh no, no, please help us. Yes. Yes, no, it's just, I think just it's just very helpful if you know the sort of mindset that people
Sure,
are
yes.
conditioned in, and you know, those are some of the big things that can hold us back, are just
Yeah.
this need for approval, or good or bad. You know, that's what was so helpful for me with the Alexander technique was, as a student, getting away from notions of good and bad. It's more efficient, inefficient.
You're right.
Um, that's what's helpful, is the kind of neutrality of it, and then you can form your own opinions, and develop based on what you're hearing. And I think this notion of modeling too is, yeah, I mean, I know that's ingrained in Alexander teacher training. Of When I think of my lessons, my very first, that powerful impact of witnessing my first Alexander technique teacher, you know, Ilana Machover, being so present in her body, so peaceful, so dynamic and lively. That's a very wonderful, wonderful thing. Well, what are some of the other questions you want to ask about the collaboration?
Well, if a musician comes to you and says, "Hey, should I take some Alexander lessons?"
Yeah, so I would say to them, well, you have to be willing to do the work, because sometimes musicians they may just want relief from pain. I mean, that's usually why they go for Alexander lessons. And you probably won't get relief in just one or two lessons. I mean, you may get a little bit of relief, but it's a process, and it's a process that you have to be willing to partner with the teacher on. And just to revert to the conversation about my own teaching of flute students, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for them to partner with me in their own development. If somebody were to say to me, should I take Alexander lessons, I would say, please do.
Last question. Some way in which you describe how you collaborate with Alexander teachers? Just some last final comments.
Well, I mean, just describing the way that you and I have worked together, Gabby, over the years, which has been really rewarding and really enriching. We work together in a way that we both notice how somebody is using themselves. For you, you have your eagle eyes, your Alexander eagle eyes. For me, it's very much, I hear it in the sound, and then I can sense what's happening in the body. And I can also see it to a certain extent, but not as in depth as you can. And so the two of us collaborate, I would say, very effectively, where I give verbal instruction, flute playing instruction, and then you also put hands on. So together with the two of us, it sort of accelerates their learning process, and it gives them an experience of perhaps more spaciousness, more freedom, more ease. That even if they can't necessarily reach that again on their own immediately, they know it's there and they can take steps towards that. And with students, it's really even small steps towards that more spaciousness. Those are small victories along the way. So when I was talking about working with students earlier, and you can lead them to water, but you can't make them drink. I mean, I think even small steps towards the watering trough are really important. So I suppose also having realistic expectations too. I think in terms of collaborations, I hope that in collaborating we're able to give a student, able to help them go a little bit further than they would if it were just a pure flute lesson, for example.
Right. And I think that allowing the students that we work with together, allowing them to see how the two of us work with one another to enhance what we do together, so that we each bring our areas of expertise and we bring it together in front of the students, with the students, shared with the students, really opens up the possibilities even more.
Yeah, and I think being guided by the Alexander philosophy too. So everything we've been talking about the use of language, I mean that's a big part of our collaboration is the way we would use language with a student. So it's never, oh, you did this wrong, or that's not right, or it's very much. I mean, we do. I mean, to the best of our ability, we do try to create that laboratory where people can experiment, letting go of habit in a way that is very supported, and very often gets wonderful results. And you can see how enthusiastic people are, when they have those little breakthroughs, and it's very moving to witness, isn't it? So another aspect of collaborating together is that we're both working on ourselves at the same time. That's one of the core principles of being an Alexander teacher. And so in the same way, I'm not asking them to do anything flute-wise that I'm not
That you're
trying
not
to do myself. And so it feels like it's a shared environment of learning, rather than hierarchical. It feels like everybody's learning at the same time. That's what it feels like.
including us.
Including us, exactly.
So with this, thank you so, so much, Lorna, for spending time with us, for making beautiful music, for advocating for Alexander technique, and for doing such amazing work with your students, with your fellow musicians, and with the audience.
Well, thank you, Gabby. And I want to share with everybody what you once said to me, because we were once in a lesson, I've had many one-on-one lessons with Gabby, and one day I said, Gabby, just posing a sort of philosophical question, why do we do this? And you said, well, so that you can reach your fullest artistic potential. So I think it's very helpful to frame this whole discussion with that. I mean, that is the purpose of it all. So I think sometimes when people talk about Alexander technique, and music, they sometimes stop short of that. They think it's maybe just for pain relief or finding ease, a little bit more ease. Why stop there? That has not been my journey at all. That maybe is what introduced me first of all to Alexander Technique, but since that point it has been sort of lifelong pursuit of the Alexander Technique really supports that unlocking your full artistic potential. So I think it's really lovely to end on that note. And thank you,
Thank you
Gabby,
so much.
for all your wisdom.